I watched your documentary last night.
Oh,
It
wow.
was awesome.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Thanks for watching.
I was excited. My wife missed you by a few years, so she wasn't fully familiar with the MTV show.
Yeah.
She had seen some of the other, like the movie stuff, but she didn't know like your whole story.
Yeah.
So always a bit of a risk whenever you recommend any show to anybody because you're like, I believe this show's going to be so good. And so I was like, but she finished it. And she was like, I'm really rooting for Tom.
Oh, right.
And so we watched it last night. It was great. And I had high expectations and it met all of them.
Oh, thanks, Bobby.
Because just a fan.
I appreciate it. You know, it's kind of been it just came out yesterday and it's been kind of a cathartic thing releasing it because it's very personal and it's, it's my whole life of, not just the Tom Green Show on MTV, but leading back before it. And I've always kept all my footage and I wanted to tell the story right. So it was cool putting it together for sure.
Watching, and we'll jump around a little bit, but watching how you did the show at your house. Like we've done a show at my house for so many years, but there have been a couple of times where people have like shown up drunk or like shown up to the house.
Oh yeah.
And that...
I'm drunk right now.
Which is why I brought it up. But it's like, when you're inviting people into your house, that's a pretty intimate thing. And we have like a 99% success rating.
Yeah.
Was that ever an issue for you where people would show up to your house and it's like, I don't know how this feels?
Well, that was when I was doing my Webovision.
Yeah.
And I built the studio in my living room. And
you don't have to say who it was. I just wonder if...
Well, it might have been me, actually. I mean, it was kind of a bit of a wild and crazy show. And, so I would always have drinks with the guests and things like that. So there was times where maybe we had a few too many for sure.
But never somebody showed up with like a big entourage with guns or anything like that?
Never guns. No, never guns. That's one thing we never had to deal with. But there's probably a couple of times where we maybe had a few too many drinks with, I know it's, a lot of people actually. Everybody, but I think I've stopped doing that. I stopped drinking while on the show. I've decided that experiment kind of had its run. Yeah, I do stand up full time. I'm always on the road doing stand up, and even in with stand up, I don't even like to have a beer before I go on stage. It really kind of affects everything, just the whole rhythm of everything. So
that was something that I knew about you was your very early beginnings of performance was going to the amateur night.
Yeah.
You would go, because again, I felt like I knew a lot. That's why I like the documentary, because it showed a lot of things that back then there wasn't social media and the ability to just dial in on somebody and find everything, right? Mm-hmm. And to see that, how long do you think you went every week? Or did you go every week to the amateur night?
Yeah, this was in the 80s. So I started when I was 16 years old. And I started going down to Yuck Yucks, which was the comedy club. It's still there. And run by Howard Wagman, who's still there, and he's encouraged me to go on stage when I was a kid. But I'd go down because I was a big fan of Norm Macdonald, who's from my hometown. And, that was sort of when I just discovered what stand-up comedy was, really. And it was just so exciting. At the time, there was, like you said, no podcasting or internet even. And the podcast, the comedians you'd see would be on The Tonight Show, and that was it. And so to be in a live club at 16 years old, they had a restaurant license, but it felt like you were going to a bar. It felt cool to be in a bar at 16, and then eventually ended up getting on stage. And Ottawa's a smaller city; it's the capital of Canada, but there wasn't a lot of comedians. There was probably a dozen comedians in Ottawa at the time doing the open mic amateur night, and everybody really encouraged each other, which was always cool. I always found it. I found it was very a good environment to be creative as a young kid. All the other comedians and people in Ottawa were always very encouraging to each other. Norm Macdonald as well would come in and after his shows. This was before he was on Saturday Night Live and all that stuff, and he'd come in and give people tips on their joke writing and performances and stuff. So, but probably you'd get up once a week if you were lucky. That was for a few years there, but I didn't pursue stand up. I stopped doing stand up when I was I did it for about 3 years, and then I stopped. Because I was in a rap group. We got a record deal. I stopped doing stand-up for a few years, and then after the Tom Green Show was on MTV, I got back into it. So
the total cliche thing is that, and when I've been to Canada, my radio show's on in different Canadian markets, Ottawa, one of them now, everybody's so much nicer there. And that was the cliche I had heard before,
Mm-hmm.
and then we would go, even in Toronto, someone would come up to you on the street, and here you're like, what are you going to take from me?
Mm-hmm.
And there it's like, hey, are you lost? Can I help you?
Yeah.
And that started to actually exist. And you're like, wow, people in Canada, is it just so cold all the time? When you finally get out, you're like, let's just be nice to everybody. But it feels like even the creative culture there, where comedians are encouraging, and like it's not like that in a lot of places here.
Yeah, it's, although we just had a great conversation with everyone at the Waffle House, just down the road.
Well, the South, they're nice. It's just the creative part of, I just feel like it's such a competition in the States.
It is, especially in the bigger cities. But I think you can have good experiences and bad experiences. And when you're just starting out, maybe you're not as threatening to other comedians when you're just 16 years old and just trying it out. But I've had, I sometimes find too, like when you're from somewhere else, everybody's like, when Americans come up to Canada, Canadians are really happy to see Americans and probably want to, show you a good time in our country, and I find that can be true when we come down here to the South, but I got a show tonight in Nashville, so I don't want to say everyone here is an asshole.
Not yet. Yeah, give it the night.
Yeah.
So it feels there's a lot of content, because I watched the documentary, and then it was like a 4-part series. Is that what it is?
No.
Can you explain what's happening with all the content? Because you have the special, you have the documentary, you have the music, listen to the record. So kind of walk me through what you're doing.
Oh, you listen to the record too?
I did.
Yeah, cool. Well, so it's funny, so there's these 3 projects that are coming out on Amazon, on Prime Video. And the documentary is sort of the story of the show and the history of the show, my old show, and how I got to where I am today, having moved back to Canada and got this farm and this mule Fanny, and sort of a new chapter in my life. And then there's a show called Tom Green Country, and that's a docuseries, and that's more about my life now. That's a 4-part series.
Got it.
So, and it's really about me settling in on the farm and getting my mule Fanny. I didn't grow up with mules and horses and chickens and things like this, so it's been a really fun few years there. This kind of documents the first year on the farm, and but I've always loved being out in nature and outdoors, and fishing and camping and canoeing and things like that. So I'm not it's not exactly a fish out of water story where I'm walking around like I don't know how to. It's a little bit of that, because I was in Los Angeles for 20 years and now I'm back home. But it's a real fun show. It's a lot different than my old show. Sort of I'm really trying to show I guess just the reality of what it's like being in Canada and my family, and being really honest and open about the feeling that I have of returning home after being in Los Angeles for so long. So there's a different tone to it, and the music in the show, the soundtrack of it, we recorded it all at the Tragically Hip's studio. It's an incredible band from Canada, and in the process of recording the soundtrack, I just started writing some songs and really started working on this music. So
I'm assuming not coincidental that at least 2 of the covers. I'm a big Bare Naked Ladies fan.
Yeah.
So I saw If I Had $1 Million. It's one of my favorite songs from them. And then the other one is Bryan Adams' Summer '69, both Canadian.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not coincidence, right?
No, and Gordon Lightfoot, Canadian, and Tragically Hip, Head by a Century also. So yeah, there's 4 covers of 4 Canadian legendary bands on there. And, we just, honestly, the album, I just went in and recorded some of those cover songs just 2 weeks ago, not even, a week and a half ago. And we really just kind of posted this yesterday or today, really. So came up on Spotify today. So I'm not sure Bryan Adams even knows we covered the song yet, to be honest with you. But, we put all the writers.
Yeah, you don't have to ask; you just have to pay.
Yeah, exactly. So it's all. I think I was kind of surprised. You know what? It's interesting because I've written music sort of for fun since I was a kid. When I was a teenager, I was in this rap group, and we were nominated for a Juno Award, which is like a Canadian Grammy Award, and we were just silly, trying to be like the Beastie Boys or something. And I've always written music, but I've never really did cover songs. And I really, really enjoyed doing these cover songs because it kind of it's a lot it's a lot of pressure when you put yourself out there when you're writing songs and you're trying to kind of say something that's heartfelt and sincere, and then you sort of can second guess yourself and go, is this any good? So, but when you're doing a cover song, well, I know this song's good. At least I know the song is good. I know maybe my performance might not be good, but I know the song is good because these are some of the best songs ever to come out of Canada. So,
do you feel the same vulnerability? Because if you're writing a song, like you just said, it's the same thing with telling jokes and doing a special.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, okay, judge me.
Mm-hmm.
I hope people like what they're judging. Do you feel that with the comedy special the same way you're talking about with the original songs?
A little bit, but the nice thing about stand-up is, you work it out over time, and I've been on the road, for years now, and I'm always sort of slipping new jokes in and creating this set that eventually you end up and go film. So by the time you're filming it, you've been performing a lot of these jokes and stories in front of audiences for sometimes even years, and you know that they work and you know that they're good. But you still get the nerves, you get the anxiety of, oh, I could flub a word tonight, or I could have a bad set. So, but having done stand-up, the longer I do stand-up, the more I kind of am able to prepare myself for a shoot, and for filming, and I usually find that I'm able to kind of pull it out in the end. We only taped that show once, the stand-up special that we did, which is called I Got a Mule. There's a lot of mule themes here, but it's sort of, they all go together. They sort of talk. The special talks about my life on the farm too, and kind of goes with the show. So, but we only taped it once. We only did one show in front of the audience, and the last time I did a special was back in 2012. We shot it in Boston, and we taped it twice, and that's sort of normal to shoot it twice, do two audiences. But I kind of wanted to just. There's a thing that happens when I do stand-up, at least, where I get this nervous. So I'm sort of saying the opposite of what I just said. I do get nervous, but it happens every night. It's a natural thing where I just sort of feel it leading up to showtime. I think it's just playing it through in your head, and it's not so much that I'm worried about it not going well. It's more about I'm worried about remembering every little detail of some new jokes or some new things, and sometimes on the day you're reshuffling around what you want to say because you're in a different city or whatever. So that's the fun of stand-up, right? Then you get that release. And I find when I do two shows in a night, or if you're taping two shows to make a special, I find that then you sort of have this feeling of like, I've got a safety net, If the first show isn't perfect, then I'll do it in the second show, and then we'll edit it together, and it's this whole process. I thought, no, I just want to go out and do one show and just like no plan B, and leave it all out there, and that's what we did. So
I struggle with feeling super secure. So my special comes out on CMT February 4th. Never done one before.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Never,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I hate it now. It hasn't aired, but I hate it now because I'm done with it, and I'm like, this is not good.
Well, it's normal to not necessarily want to watch your stand-up special over and over again. Like, I sometimes have a hard time watching myself back, because you see every little thing you could do different. I'm sure
it's
that's
part of the edit, and watching the edit is like every fraction of every second where it's just like I'm so over me that it's like the promotion of it even feels weird because I'm like, I don't even know if I believe in it anymore.
It's probably a good thing, I think. No, because if you were too into it, then that might come off as a little unlikable too. I think you can go too far the other way. Where you're just so into looking at yourself that maybe no one else would want to look at. We
took all the mirrors down at the house too. We have no more mirrors either. Yeah. We just eliminated me totally from the house.
People like to see that vulnerability, I think, in stand-up because they want to see an authentic performance, and they want to see somebody that's being real. And everybody feels nervous when they're on stage, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think that's probably a normal thing. A lot of people never look at their specials; they go up and tape.
I wouldn't.
Yeah,
I would if I wasn't a control freak.
Mm-hmm.
I think with the creative part of it, even with like books and stuff, like I never want to read them back after I've written them, but I feel like if I don't, then I'm going to miss something and regret it. So I'm like weighing the two shames. Which will I feel more shame if I don't do, which is not the best place to be.
Yeah.
But that's what I feel like I'm always balancing out, the shame of me not being good.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Was there ever a confidence issue with you creatively?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. I think a lot of what I do comes from that fear and challenging myself. And I mean, the documentary was an extreme example of what you're talking about, because I'm going through, thousands of hours of footage going back 30 years. And some of it's just like, whoa, I can't believe I did that, when I was 22 years old, and there's just so much outrageous behavior that we were doing on the old Tom Green show on MTV and before. And then, you look at things that happened, and when I was first on MTV, and, I had this new kind of show, I guess you would say, which was just outrageous in a different way, because we were out in the streets shooting with video cameras, and it was different. And I had this sort of thought in my head that, like, I always have to be completely wild and nuts every time I go on a show. If I'd go on Conan O'Brien or Jay Leno or, a talk show of some sort, I would feel like I have to go just completely, off the rails crazy. And so going through the footage, I'd sort of, oh boy, I should have just toned it down a little bit, but it's funny when you're looking at yourself 20 years ago and you're thinking, oh, I could have done this or I could have done that. And I've had a lot of those self-doubt and, questioning, should I have done this or that? And making this documentary was terrifying for sure to put it all together, but it was also, like I said, very cathartic, because I get to kind of put it out the story and kind of explain myself in a way. This is sort of the story that I kind of want people who maybe don't know much about me, haven't been following me along the last 15 years and coming to my stand-up shows, maybe sort of remember me from back in the day on MTV, and don't really understand that a lot of what I was doing was a performance or a character I was creating. So this kind of, I think, will be nice to kind of set the record straight on some of that stuff.
Were you able to, when editing the footage, be proud of that kid? Like in therapy, they'll hold a picture up of me as a kid and go like, let's talk to this kid. Were you able to have that moment?
I think so. I think it sort of almost kind of happened yesterday when we released the doc to the world, and it's sort of this, I'm sort of going through it right now, even just the past 2 days. People are seeing the documentary for the first time. I'm getting, texts and emails and calls from friends that I've known my whole life, and family, and everybody's really kind of happy that the doc came together the way it did, and that I'm getting to sort of put this out there, and it's just sort of big relief for me, because it's like it's been a lot of pent up thinking about this over the last really 20 years. Like 20 years of going, oh boy, I really wish I, like when I hosted Saturday Night Live. I got to host Saturday Night Live. Okay, I'm 28 years old, I guess, maybe 29 when I hosted Saturday Night Live, and the show was doing great, and I want to make it a wild and crazy episode, right? And I remember I had two friends of mine who were friends from high school, actually, who were writers with me on the Tom Green show. But really, it was my friends from high school and I were, coming up with crazy stuff to do with video cameras. And now all of a sudden we were on MTV, and I got asked to come on Saturday Night Live. And I asked them, hey, could I bring my friends from the show along? And can they help do some skits with us? And so, they said yes. Lauren Michaels said yes. And they gave us a little office. And now I'm there with my two friends, and we're writing these sketches. And we're trying to push the envelope, as far as we can, because we're thinking, this has got to be the craziest, But I sort of think in hindsight, sometimes I thought, oh, geez, I think some of the writers at the show might have interpreted that as I brought my own writers and all this stuff, and they didn't really understand. It was just like kind of me kind of trying to, include my friends, So getting emotional. So it's weird. It is a weird thing. I do get emotional about it, because it's like, it's weird. You try to do the right thing, and then it gets misinterpreted, and it's very tough sometimes when it kind of, it's nice to be able to tell this story in a way where, okay, I've been driving all day too, so I'm okay. I'm doing fine, Bobby.
It feels like maybe the other writers or performers were unfairly territorial, thinking you had other intentions when you brought your boys with you.
It's a very competitive environment, Saturday Night Live. I've found over the last few years, I've seen a lot of other people, cast members and stuff, doing interviews about their time on the show, and I sort of, okay, cool. It happens to everybody. Everybody's young. They're there to prove themselves. You only get so much time on the air, and so then when we came in, we were just kids coming in, and we're trying to sort of do the same thing, but we're just there for the week. I think it might have been taken the wrong way by a few people, but all in all, it was a complete sort of honor and privilege to have done it. But I know the thing that's weird about that episode, somebody brought it up to me the other day because I've been talking about, the documentary. It's one of the weirder episodes, and that's saying something because we're talking about a show that's been done a lot of weird stuff, But, this is maybe just a little weirder. And I'm sort of surprised they gave us as much leeway as they did. Kind of wish they hadn't, actually. But no, it's definitely a unique episode, and people are starting to discover it again on online and stuff. So,
what does 12-year-old Tom listen to?
Music-wise,
like
12 years old.
Yeah, when you're 12, that's an age for me when it kind of all started to come together.
Yeah, well, Sugar Hill Gang, Rapper's Delight. I discovered it around 12, and that was a big one. But I might have been 13 when I discovered that, though. So 12 would have been Michael Jackson, Thriller. Let's see, what year was I? Yeah, was Michael Jackson Thriller out yet in 83? Let's see. The Bee Gees was the first cassette that I had. My parents gave me a tape deck and the Bee Gees Staying Alive. I wish they'd given me a different tape, but anyways, no. But so I would listen to that a lot. 12 years old, I had a few things that it was Michael Jackson.
What about like TV shows?
What
did you watch that kind of shaped you in that preteen?
The reason I'm hesitating, I'm trying to think, what was I, 11 or 12? Because I know shortly after 12, I got a lot more into music. But it was always sort of just what was playing on the radio when I was 12. What was on the top 10 that night, would be sort of what was, whether it was, I don't know, Survivor or something like that, like there's lots of different songs that were playing on the radio when I was 12. But when I got to be about 14, that's when I really kind of found myself really liking rap music and things like that. So, yeah.
So Beastie Boys, one of my favorites of all time, like top 5 albums for sure. It's Licensed to Ill because it was the first one.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's what introduced me.
Yeah.
I'm just a goofy white kid from Arkansas.
Yeah.
And they're Jewish rappers from kind of Brooklyn. So not exactly the same, but they were just different. So it was kind of like my infatuation with David Letterman. He was a Midwest guy that looked odd compared to everybody else.
Yeah.
And I was odd compared to everybody else. So it kind of gave me a bit of hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
With those guys, with Letterman, so love the
Same.
Beastie Boys. I wonder if that was what it was like for you.
Beastie Boys, David Letterman, Tony Hawk, skateboarding. These were my things that I loved. I mean, we did a cover band of the Beastie Boys in high school and went up and I did Fight for Your Right to Party and No Sleep Till Brooklyn and Run DMC Raising Hell. This was me rapping on stage in the first year of high school, I guess. And then David Letterman, I mean, I talk about this a lot in the documentary because it's sort of the precursor to what I was doing on my show where I was trying to emulate David Letterman. I was going out with a video camera and doing stuff on the street, kind of like what David Letterman did when he went out in the street. But it's hard to kind of put it in perspective for people who don't remember what the world was like back then. It was no internet, so going to watch television at 12:30 in the morning, where there was normally a color bars test pattern on, and because it was on so late at the time, that was crazy that there was even a show on after midnight during the week. it kind of felt like you were discovering something and seeing something that nobody else knew about. So it felt like going down this rabbit hole of like that you can go down on the internet now and find your own thing. Back then, you'd find your own thing in sort of obscure places, like Thrasher magazine was the skateboard magazine that I'd, go have to find in one little skateboard shop, and that was the internet to me. That was my glimpse into the outside world, outside of the mainstream television. And then rap music was also like that, listening to Boogie Down Productions or Run DMC and these groups coming out of New York City, and you're just up in Ottawa going, wow, what is this? What is this world? This is exciting,
How close were you guys with Organized Rhyme to actually pursuing that, like, for a decade?
I mean, we were really, really into it for sure. We went down to New York City when I was, a teenager, and we recorded a demo, and then we ended up getting a record deal in Canada on A&M Records, and we sort of did it for a couple of years after that. But then, it stopped. It never was released in the United States. It was sort of a successful in Canada thing. It would play on the radio. I mean, I was just out of high school, and Greg, who was the other rapper in the group, he was still in high school. So, he's in high school, and we had a song on the number one on the dance charts in Canada, and we go perform.
Was that cool at school? I mean, were you guys cool because you were on the radio?
He was cool, for sure. I might not have been cool. He was definitely cool. There was a comedic element to the band, so, I would always say, well, let's put laundry baskets on our heads between songs and play industrial music and do sort of a synchronized dance routine. So we would do this weird stuff. No, he was very funny, and we'd do this funny stuff. But it was cool, though. It was cool, but he was definitely cooler than I was. I was kind of more the goofball. But I made all the beats and stuff, and it was exciting. And it kind of, we would go down to Toronto to go on Much Music, and we'd host the Rap City show, it was called, and perform on different shows live, and that's when I really realized, started seeing television studios and lights and cameras. I thought, I want to do this. I want to do television, and that's kind of when the record sort of fizzled out. After that, I went back to school and studied broadcasting and started the Tom Green Show. So,
how accessible was the public access station where you were?
So it's a little different in Canada. So. Because sometimes you think of public access and it's a real kind of, gritty little, crappy little station. But in Canada, so they have the cable delivery company, sort of like it was called Rogers Cable. So the company that you buy your cable from, they were sort of required to create a little community channel in every city. So because of that, there was good equipment there. Professional kind of studios. And because I had already had the rap album and stuff, they kind of took us in. I was at school, broadcasting school, so I had a bunch of kids that knew how to operate cameras and stuff, and we came in and we pitched the show, and they kind of let us go do 4 episodes. And then after those 4 episodes, it was sort of had a little bit of a, it was weird enough that they let us keep going, so.
Did people watch that channel in your town, just in general? Like,
no, not really. No, not really. That was it. It sort of quickly became the show that was sort of There was shows like the Mayor had a show, Mayor's Hotline, and they had a sports show where they talk about what the Ottawa Senators were doing, and they were all sort of very not very watched shows. But we sort of built this little following, and we had a little studio audience, and kids came down, and there was 60 kids in the audience, and it just sort of started kind of slowly catching on, and it that got picked up by the Rogers Community Network. So then they started running it across Canada.
Say you were shooting in the same place; they were just distributing it to the
whole country. And then,
did you feel a change there when that happened? Could you feel it like you start to be bigger in Canada?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That was early on because then we did a pilot for the CBC, which is the national network, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and then that didn't get picked up. But then we went and did 2 seasons on this small network called the Comedy Network, which is owned by CTV, the other big network. And then we were sort of doing a show that had a real kind of But it was happening fast at that point. By that point, it was maybe over the course of a year and a half. We were on TV and people were excited about the show, and then all of a sudden MTV picked it up, and we were kind of set off in that direction. So
being that young, doing a show weekly, did that feel like you were in the meat grinder at all, even before you were getting paid? Really?
I was really excited to be doing it. I just couldn't believe that I even had the ability to do it. So it's my friend Glenn Humplick and my friend Phil Giroux, and they were, buddies of mine. And I met Glenn Humplick at college radio because I'd been doing a college radio show at Ottawa University. I didn't go to Ottawa University, but I did a radio show there at midnight till 2 a.m. on Fridays. So we were just really, I wasn't getting paid. I didn't get paid to do the show for 4 or 5 years. It was just a labor of love. I would go down to the studio and get in the edit bay and edit all this stuff. But it was just sort of really kind of driven by this sort of excitement by the fact that we were actually able to do this TV show. I was sort of driven by the idea that I was going to try to see if we could actually turn it into a job. And eventually it did actually happen, unbelievably. But I was pretty motivated. I do sometimes think that it's kind of, when I'm watching the documentary, even while I'm editing it, putting it all together, when I watch the final documentary, I still go, geez, kind of can't believe I stuck with it so long, because it was a lot of work when I think about it. But at the time when you're young, you're kind of just so excited just to be doing something.
Who do you hear from? Is it somebody, an executive at MTV? Do they call whomever's now managing you, representing you? How quick does all of that happen? And what's like the board? Like, I don't know, you walk into a business room, like the cliche thing, there's all these chairs and they offer you the big deal you've been waiting for. Like, what really happened?
I've got a pretty hilarious story about that. I don't know if I'll see if I can paint the picture properly. So, well, first of all, what happened was the show was now kind of popular in Canada enough that I got invited on the one talk show we had in Canada at the time. It was called Mike Bullard was the name of the host. He just passed away. Rest in peace, Mike. He was a very funny guy. He did me a solid there. He'd have us on his show. And I'd go on and do some, goofy thing that I probably, like I was talking about earlier, I probably, regret doing. But, it was, I'd go on with bags of milk. And we have milk comes in bags in Canada, which is strange. But anyways, I'd pop milk bags and milk would fly everywhere and the microphone would break and all this kind of stuff. But his manager was there, who's from Los Angeles, also since passed away. He's in the documentary. His name's Howard Lapidus. And he represented Jimmy Kimmel, who was not, he was on radio at the time, and Carson Daly, who was on TRL, and Norm Macdonald, and also Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla, who were doing Loveline on MTV. So Howard was in the MTV universe, and he brought the show there, and that's kind of how we got the initial meeting to do the pitch of the show. So they saw the few tapes that he showed them, and then they flew me down to Los Angeles, and I'm probably 27 or 28 years old, and put me up in the Mondrian, which is the most Los Angeles feeling place to be. It's sort of modern, artsy hotel, furthest thing from Ottawa, and it's right beside the House of Blues, which is no longer there. But the House of Blues, they had these pitch meetings every year for MTV, and they'd bring all the producers and writers in to come out, and you have a stand in front of the MTV executives. And the top executive there was Brian Graydon, who I did not know who anyone was, but he was the one who ultimately signed the show. And so they had told me they had seen 4 or 5, or they had seen a bunch of our tapes now at this point, and they had sort of directed me, play this one, this one, and this one. You're going to come out, you're going to play these 4 tapes, and then talk a bit about the show. And so there's this thing I used to do, which again, I put it in the documentary, so I should probably not be embarrassed to say it, but I used to kind of, for a gag, I would suck milk out of cow's udders. It was just a gag. But and they said, don't play that one though. Don't play that one. But I just was such a idiot, I guess, that they literally told me to make a VHS tape and put this tape on where you paint your parents' house, the one where you have the crutches and you're falling down on the street on the crutches, and the one where you go in the pharmacy and try to buy condoms. Play those 3, but don't play the cow udder one. And I was so sort of sure that, no, we need a gross out one, we need to have a balance here, It's very important to me that we have a balance. So I still put that one on the tape, and I came out and I did my big speech, and it was actually like it wasn't complete idiocy, like it was thought through. Like I did say in the speech, in the pitch, that this is shot on home video cameras and it looks raw and it looks rough, and it's because I'm a skateboarder and skateboarders are doing this now, like this kind of thing, and it'll be relatable. And so I really did kind of try to explain why it looked the way it looked. And then I played everything, and then I played the cow udder thing, and of course the room just went nuts because it's disgusting, right? And funny, right? It's really funny though. Dressed as Captain Kirk or something like that, squirting milk all over my face. But then I had brought a backpack with me, and in the backpack I had a couple of cans of shaving cream. And I just, for whatever reason, decided after I do that, while everyone's freaking out about the cow udder sucking, I'm going to lie down on the boardroom table in front of everyone and spray shaving cream all over my face and scream that I want to be on MTV. So I did that, and everyone's going, what the hell's this kid doing? And I took the shaving cream, and I walked up to the guy who looked like he was in charge, and I put some on his face, and then I just walked out. That was Brian Graydon, and then I just walked out of the room, and the guy who had been kind of coaching me to do the pitch, called me and was laughing and said, "You put shaving cream on my boss's face?" But they called the next day and they picked up the show.
The next day?
Yeah. And I remember going down the elevator with Howard Lapidus, and he said, that was the craziest, best pitch I've ever seen. I never pitched anything before. I didn't know what a pitch was. But naivety, I guess, kind of is good sometimes. But and then they literally, I was moved to, they got me an apartment in New York City, and we moved down to New York. We took all our tapes, and which were hundreds and hundreds of tapes, and immediately they began sort of working on packaging these tapes, and they built a studio for us in Times Square, right beside where they do TRL, and that was it. The first 10 episodes were just old clips from the Canadian show repackaged with the new studio.
At what point could you feel kind of the zeitgeist, your fame, be tangible?
It was so crazy because, MTV it's different now, right? Everybody watched MTV. And we didn't have MTV in Canada either, which made it extra weird because I was walking into this network. I didn't have that kind of sort of, I wasn't intimidated by it as much as I think I would have been if I'd watched MTV. I wasn't emulating, I don't think, the culture of MTV because I didn't grow up watching MTV. We grew up watching Much Music, right? And I mean, this is a little too far into the weeds here, but they had a promo department at MTV, which was as big as the programming department. I mean, there's only 5. You know this because you're in music and you know this, I'm sure, but most people don't know this. The detail of this about MTV is the programming department and the promo department were separate entities and equally as big, and they would run promos all days for the shows and things. And so they started running promos for the show like a month before the show even came on. And so as soon as the promos started airing, of me, humping a dead moose or whatever, which Eminem rapped about and all this stuff. But before, and just doing the pranks on my parents and doing all this stuff. Before the show even aired, it was instantly couldn't go outside in Manhattan with everybody was just coming up to me on the streets of Manhattan. My parents tell this story. They tell this story where they were in New York and they were getting stopped on the street. It was wild. And then when the show premiered a few weeks later, it's hard to remember this, but like at the time there was only like 3 or 4 other shows on MTV. There was Celebrity Deathmatch, Road Rules, Real World, and Daria was a cartoon animated show, and that's about it, really. Might have been one other. And they would play the show like in blocks, so every day the show was on they'd play like the Tom Green Show, like 10 episodes in a row every day for the first year that we were on the air. So it was unlike anything I had ever imagined, really. I mean, it went from complete anonymity in the U.S. to just sort of, it was a hit. It was a hit show.
Was Beavis and Butthead right there too?
Yeah, they weren't making it anymore, so they were running reruns of it, but they'd stopped making it. And Mike Judge was doing movies and stuff, and he was not working on no show. In fact, our head writer was Chris Brown, who was the head writer of Beavis and Butthead. He came in and worked with me and the writers to kind of come up with all our new material. Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing about getting famous?
Well, a lot of weird stuff about it, but it's mostly, it was mostly pretty exciting. Like I said, I don't think I really knew how to sort of behave, like how to act as far as, you're used to being kind of, I was used to being kind of an underdog kid who didn't have any sort of access to anything and always trying to prove yourself to people. Hey, I'm trying to let people see that you have something to offer with your comedy or whatever. And then all of a sudden the show's big and, I think the initial, like when the story I told about Saturday Night Live, the initial instinct is, oh, now I have to really go out there and really show people, how serious I am. And I think, the truth is probably it would have been better just to have laid back a little bit at that point because, you already got the job, but, and people are kind of looking at you a little differently and there's people, but I mean, these are things that, I think are learning curves that you deal with and kind of first world problems in a way, like, I mean, to complain about, it was mostly just your dreams coming true, right? All of a sudden everything I've ever wanted is here. I've got my show and my parents don't have to worry about, giving me money for gas and stuff. And but it was definitely weird. I kind of fortunate it sort of happened a little slowly, but it was night and day. Because the thing is, in Canada, the show was big. I was getting recognized in Canada, but I wasn't making any money in Canada. It was still kind of a strange little thing that I was doing up in Canada that was kind of cute. Oh, that's cute, that kid's doing this thing. And they'd write an article about it. But when all of a sudden you're on MTV and doing movies and getting commercials and all sorts of things like that, it did become a lot to kind of process for sure.
Did it affect your mental health to have to outdo the last thing constantly?
Yeah.
Like, because they've seen it, so now I got to get crazier. Like, was that a struggle mentally?
I think the thing that was cool about that specifically, definitely some stuff affected my mental health and my emotional sort of, life. I think that was maybe even more to do with a little later, when I was sick and things like that. I had cancer when the show was on, and that was where it started to become too much to kind of handle. But we had sort of we had different types of bits we did on the show. So there was ones that were the crazy, gross ones, and then we had ones that were more, deadpan interviews, and so we kind of tried to have different levels and layers to the show, that it wasn't always just about trying to up the ante, but there was that feeling like you'd have a bit that would become the one that everyone was talking about, and that would last for a while. You paint your parents' house plaid, and people were talking about it for a few months, and you're like, come on, we did that 3 months ago. We got to come up with something crazier than that. So, and there's definitely ones that I'm glad that I didn't do. I didn't put this in the documentary actually, but there was. Everyone was encouraging me to replicate this stunt that somebody had done where they tied a whole bunch of helium balloons to a lawn chair, and the guy died, who did it originally, and they were trying to convince, well, do it over the ocean, and literally was trying to get talked into doing this by some of my guys that we were writing with and or writers that we were writing with, and I did not want to do that. So there was an element for sure of trying to push push the envelope every week. Yeah.
You talked about in the documentary the Buster Keaton, very famous. The front of the house comes down, and he's standing in the right spot. So
Right.
that open went like legendary.
Mhm.
But you doing that stunt yourself, replicating that, and everyone going, I don't think you should do this. Insurance said no, but you wanted to do that one.
Yeah.
How nervous were you to actually, even though you're standing on the right spot, but that house is coming down on top of you?
Yeah.
How nervous were you to pull that one off?
That was a nail biter for sure. I mean, just because they tested it, it was. I mean, I was as sure as one can be that the house was not going to kill me, but wouldn't have done it if I thought there was even a. I mean, I guess there's always a chance, but it seemed like a calculated risk. I was glad when we were finished. I was glad it was over. It was the whole house too. It wasn't just the frame of the house.
Yeah.
And there was glass in the window. I had to try to kind of, modernize it a little bit. We can get good breakaway glass in 1999. So, yeah.
That's super cool to do something that you've always looked at as legendary, which was why I was so excited to watch all the Letterman stuff in the documentary. Again, grew up, that was like my guy. Indulge me a bit. Just talk about why Letterman was important to you and how cool it was to go on the show and then also get to host the show.
Yeah. I found when I was going through all my tapes, I found that moment where I got the call to host Letterman. So that was just kind of.
Yeah, you're like with Glenn outside the car. You're like, best manager ever. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really, you could see you get emotional, so you could see it mattered.
Yeah. It was, I'd forgotten that tape existed when I got the call from Letterman to host, this was a little later. That was in 2003 when I was doing a new talk show for MTV's. But in some ways that was more meaningful even than the first time I got to be a guest on the show. But I mean, he was, everyone has sort of one hero when they're growing up that they just sort of would just sort of, you think the world of, and you just sort of consume all of their material. And David Letterman was definitely mine. And I think it's definitely got something to do with what I was saying about earlier about how it was before the internet and you sort of felt like you were discovering something and you could kind of almost made a part of your identity. Like I know what this Late Night with David Letterman show is, and I'm different than everybody else who's watching other shows. I'm watching this and this is my thing. But of course, millions of people felt that way, but it was still the sort of the underground talk show. And so to get that call from him, I mean, you can watch my first appearance on the show and you notice I don't go out on the show and go crazy and flip, costume and go crazy because I was out of complete reverence to him. It's not that I didn't have, reverence towards Jay Leno and the Tonight Show and all that stuff, but that was the very first show I'd ever been on. It was David Letterman, and I was just kind of couldn't even believe that it was happening. So I was sort of it's fun when I watch the footage of it. I'm clearly a nervous wreck. I'm holding my hand over my face and just kind of sort of like it's one of those things where it feels like you're not even in your body. You're just like, am I even here right now? Is this really David Letterman just looking at me, talking to me? So, but it was incredible. And he was the first person to call the show when the show went on MTV and ask us to be on. So, yeah. And
then when you get invited back again, if it's a second time, then you realize, well, he must like me. He must not think less of me after I was on. Like that has to be kind of a ribbon, right?
Yeah.
To go on again because that means Dave likes you.
Yeah. And when he let me host was sort of just unbelievable. Yeah. The fact that he let me take over for the night and it was definitely those were the highlight moments of the whole experience of the show and everything was being able to be on Letterman. That was all I'd ever imagined or dreamed of.
Because things were happening so fast once the show took off on MTV, was there anything in the documentary, footage that didn't make it or did make it, that you were able to see to go, oh, maybe I didn't appreciate or understand or have the time to value? Just I was watching the clip of you and Steve Martin Short.
Yeah.
That, even just owning that picture, feels like you could look at it now and go, wow, that is substantial.
And I look at it and I go, I can't believe I had, At the time, I did have the balls to do it, but a few weeks later, I only had one. But because I was before I had my testicular cancer, right before actually, I got invited on the Martin Short daytime talk show, and Steve Martin was the guest, and I was the second guest. So I'm sitting between Steve Martin and Martin Short, who are two of my heroes, right? And if you talk about the most amazing, silly characters in comedy and history, it's Ed Grimley and the Jerk. They're two of their big characters that they did, and that's why I ended up. I can't believe I look at that now, and I just can't believe I had the balls which I actually did to put a cardboard box on my head and just sort of completely be really silly and try to out silly myself, and then get embarrassed about it. And they were really funny. If you watch the whole, we couldn't put the whole clip in, but they were really, really supportive in a way. It was a really funny thing. I remember right before the show happened, you got to keep in mind, I'd been living in the United States for less than a year at this point, and just this whole thing was just kind of unbelievable still. I'd been on Letterman, I'd been on Oprah, a couple shows, but the whole thing just made no sense that I was going on Martin Short's show. And Steve Martin came back to the dressing room before the show, and he sort of told me he'd watched a bunch of episodes of the show and everything, and of my show. So it was it's hard to believe that actually happened. Yeah.
Your music career, again, there are parallels with Steve Martin, who did music and comedy, but also is a proficient banjo player.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like he's a real deal musician. I think at times him and Edie Brickell were and still tour, and they do serious bluegrass. Mm-hmm. But he's the first comedian to ever play a stadium, right? And part of that was he'd play his banjo, but it was comedy. So there would be this blur of you wouldn't really know musically what Steve Martin was doing, because he was fantastic, technically excellent, but also hilarious with it.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to your music, I feel like you've done a similar thing. I expected Organized Rhyme to be funny at first, but you guys actually rapped.
Yeah.
You technically were good rappers, and that's why, like you said, you were nominated for a Juno Award. Did you win the Juno or nominated?
No, we were just nominated.
Who beat you?
Is a rapper named Devin, and he had a Canadian rapper, and he had a song called "Keep It Slammin'," and it was a big popular hit at the time too. So, and there was Maestro Fresh Wes, I believe I think it was Devin that won that year, but there was the biggest rapper back then was Maestro Fresh Wes, and he usually won those two. So, but
how do you feel about the ambiguity with you and your music career, because you are proficient?
It's always after Organized Rhyme, it always became something that I just have been doing for fun, and like I said, when we started making the documentary and the show, I produced these shows too, directed them, but also I'm producing them with my production company. And so I had the creative sort of freedom to decide what the soundtrack's going to be. And during, honestly, as recently as the pandemic, which is getting a little while back, but, when everything shut down and my stand-up tour was canceled, I did sort of, at the time, think, well, one of the things I'm going to do with all this time is I'm going to actually try to really learn how to play the piano. I've meant to do it for years, and I start trying to figure out some more chords on the guitar, but I was really focused on that. I always had a home studio. But then when I moved back to Canada and I got this farm, turns out I end up being sort of, somehow managed to be able to connect with the Tragically Hip, and they're just a legendary rock band from Canada, and the late Gord Downey was their sort of very poetic and extremely incredible frontman of their band, and the band still owns the studio, the Bathhouse Studio, and we were able to record our soundtrack for the show there, and I've been kind of playing with some country musicians who are in the area, in the country out near my farm, and I just went in and recorded the soundtrack initially for the show, and then we just kept going. We've just been writing and doing songs for the last 3 years, and kind of really just doing it. I mean, the album really was just something that really over the last couple of months decided, hey, I think maybe I'll put this out at the same time as the show, and so that's out there now too. Yeah.
I think the expectation was I'm going to play the music and hear the absurdity. And then it felt, oh, this isn't absurd. And is that absurd that it's not absurd? And so then I'm origamiing myself. And in my mind, I made the parallel. Like I would do this with Steve Martin stuff when he was making music for the sake of making it, going, wow, this feels so different because he's being different. And I am entertained by not quite understanding like where he is mentally with his music, because not all your songs are like hilarious.
Yeah, no,
purposefully.
Yeah, no, for sure. They're very serious, most of them. There's a couple funny ones in there for sure, but I don't know. I've never really listened to funny music. I mean, I did make the Bum Bum song, so the Bum Bum song was as silly as they get. But I don't know. It's something about when it could also be my limited amount of chords that I know. So it's, I always
G, C, D. It's about what I do too.
All these sort of minor chords and
couple
stuff.
E's.
They're sad chords, but I don't know. I think I just, when I sit down to write music, I always try to write something that's coming from the heart. And a lot of times those emotions aren't funny. They're more introspective and thoughtful emotions. And those are the words that come to mind. But, and writing a soundtrack for the show. The show was about coming home and returning home to family and going back to your roots. So I wanted to have a nice sort of real soundtrack to the show. So
I have about 4 more questions, and Mike has a couple before we wrap up. What would you say was the most fun micro period of all of the most fun? Like, what did you do where you're like, man, this is awesome, where you could appreciate it?
I've been saying this quite a bit lately because honestly, I really am having the most fun I've ever had right now. I think I just feel like I'm in a place where I'm, able to handle and understand what it is that I'm doing more. I'm not overwhelmed by it. It's not on MTV and being thrust into everybody's face. So there's a little bit less pressure. And honestly, getting to know the animals that I have now, this beautiful mule that I am learning to ride, and it's very peaceful out there. And I'm also just recently engaged as well to my
congratulations.
Beautiful fiance Amanda. So my life's kind of coming together, and in a way that is I'm feeling very settled. And moving back to Canada, getting this farm. It's the first time I've ever lived somewhere where I know I have no intention to ever leave. I'm not going to move somewhere else. I'll be living, at this farm for the rest of my life, and it's very. I feel very grounded now, and having a lot of fun with that. And Amanda is here with me, and we're on tour right now. I'm doing doing our comedy tour across the U.S. and driving. We drove down here from Canada. And we're just having a great time.
You've driven the whole way?
Yeah, we drove here. Yeah, we drove. Well, our first show was in Chattanooga yesterday. So
that was the first show?
Yeah, so we just drove down from Canada. We took a couple of days. It was nice.
Yeah, I can't believe you drove. That's awesome.
Well, we're actually in my camper van that I got at the beginning of the pandemic. So when we're on, we have some breaks built into the tour, and then we're going to go do some off-grid camping, maybe head out to the Grand Canyon and do some photography and maybe write some more songs.
Have you ever been out there to the Grand Canyon? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
It's one of the things that and I've been able to do some cool stuff and see some cool stuff, but it's like still in awe of like how massive and magnificent that thing is. And mostly I'm just like, I'll Google image it, I'm good. I've seen. Yeah. But like that's a really cool part of the country and the world that I still would like to spend more time there.
Something very mysterious and magical about the American Southwest, and so much of Hollywood was based on those John Ford movies out in Monument Valley, and when the pandemic happened, when I was sort of isolated there, I got this camper van. It's really cool. I didn't even know these existed, but there's these really cool guys that were on that show Shark Tank, and they started this company. These two friends started this company in Phoenix, and they refurbish Ram ProMasters, right? And so it's I've discovered them on the internet. It's like Boho Van, it's called, and then they take a Ram ProMaster and they put a fridge in it, and they put solar panels on the roof, and these battery systems in it. So I kind of discovered that at the beginning of the pandemic, and I would go out into the desert, and I built a recording studio in the van, and I started exploring because I was living in LA at the time, so I'd go out for a few weeks out to various places and just kind of set up camp. And it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced before with electronics, where when we go shoot videos, you always have to go back to the hotel and charge your batteries up at the end of the day. But now all of a sudden we have unlimited battery power and solar power. So to go out into the middle of some of these beautiful places and just be creative out there and be able to stay and just run a recording studio off grid was really kind of an incredible eye-opening thing, because I went down this rabbit hole of all the places that are out in this country that are not even widely talked about, like Native American ruins that are just incredible. Everyone always talks about Machu Picchu. And the pyramids and all of these incredible ancient sites, right? And people are so interested in it. But there's so much of that kind of thing from the same, as old as Machu Picchu in the American Southwest. There's a Chaco Canyon in New Mexico is a place that's like a Pueblo city that was just only discovered in the 1950s. It had been buried, and it's this massive stone city like Machu Picchu right there. And so, to start discovering this and all the different sort of natural phenomenon and just beautiful landscapes. And if you like photography, if you like being alone in a camper van, it was really fun exploring that. So I'm taking my fiance Amanda out there we're going to go look at some of our favorite spots and take some pictures. She loves taking photos too, and hasn't. Amanda's Canadian, so she hasn't gotten to see a lot of the country. The first place I took her was the Waffle House in Nashville.
Nothing is more American and Southern. And Amanda, watch out! Everybody's got a gun around here. All of us, we're all packing right now. So,
yep.
That's really cool. Two questions left. Talk to me about the dog, Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
Big dog guy myself, and you come in with a dog. I love it. Rescue,
yeah. She's called a pot cake dog. They're from the Bahamas. They call them pot cakes. And they basically, the local Bahamian people, like they feed the stray dogs the burnt rice from the bottom of the pots. They call them pot cakes. It's generations of, dogs that got off the ships, and they've become these sort of mixed breeds. They're a really sweet dog. And her name's Charlie because she's named after John Steinbeck's Travels with Charlie in Search of America. And I got her right at the beginning of the pandemic, where I got the van, and my dad said, "Oh, that's like Travels with Charlie." And I said, "Oh, well, Steinbeck." And he had a camper van, and he drove around America, and he wrote a book about America. And so I did that with my YouTube channel. And that whole first year of traveling in the van is on my YouTube channel. If you scroll back, you can see all these places. I went to Chaco Canyon and many of these other incredible sites and just made videos. So Charlie's named after Travels with Charlie, and she's coming back to the desert with us. So,
final question from me: what bit over your career have you done that you still think is super funny?
Well, probably the Slutmobile.
The car, hilarious.
Can I say that?
Yeah, you can.
It's funny. It's funny how the world's changed. Like at the time, we were just saying it openly in Oprah. I'd say it. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I would have used that phrasing today. But it, it was my parents' 1992 Honda Accord, where I painted the pornographic scene, had it airbrushed on their car, and Dad wakes up in the morning, what the hell have you done to the car? It's, it's their reaction is really what it was. And that was always the best bits were the ones that had the best reactions. Undercutter's Pizza was
so funny.
One of the best reactions. And that was because that was one of I think that may have been the first, if not one of the very first videos we shot when we moved to the United States, and we're in Long Island. And, the bit is I dress up like a pizza delivery guy. We stake out a pizza shop. I follow the pizza delivery guy. I've got my own pizza, but there's no toppings on it. I've got a fishing tackle box with new toppings. And then I follow the pizza guy up to the delivery. And then when the person comes out, I start making the same pizza they ordered and try to sell it to them for cheaper, undercutting the competition. Undercutter's Pizza. That's the bit. But, we had no idea that the guy who I was delivering the pizza to was like working on his car, and he was like sort of a pretty tough guy. Got real mad. He started chasing me with a hammer and screaming at me. And Okay, this is, but it's sort of the reaction was always what was. So those are a couple of my favorites. Yeah.
I love the bit where you would just lay down.
Yeah.
And that's all reaction, but you got to have the courage, the nuts to just lay there and let people slowly build.
Yeah.
And then when do you choose just to get up?
Yeah. That was one of the first, because that was early on in the show, and that was one of the first bits that happened that was really, that people started talking about a lot. And I used to do that in school. Like I would just basically lie down on my face with my hands at my side. Later, people called that planking, but and just to kind of confuse people, right? It was just sort of a stupid thing I would do. So then I think that bit was exciting to us because we had a wireless microphone, and it was the first time we had a wireless microphone, so we realized, I can be across the street. We can do a sort of a candid camera type of bit. So we put the camera up on top of a building, and I just went and lay down on a public street, and it was a little social experiment. How long till somebody comes and helps me, And it was a long time because we had to speed the footage up because I'd probably line there for 20 minutes before people came to help me. So maybe Canadians aren't that nice. I don't know.
That's so funny. I love people's reactions. Mike, a couple questions for Tom.
Yeah, I love the documentary. It kind of reminded me a lot of how many of your quotes have become a part of my vocabulary. Like I can't see tubing without saying tubing.
Oh, tubing, yes, that's right.
What is the quote that people reference to you the most? They say, that's my favorite Tom Green quote.
Well, Daddy, would you like some sausage? That's a big one from Freddie Got Fingered. Probably tubing. Tubing's good. Let's see, the Bum Bum song gets a lot of references. People will sing that. There's always a lot of little sort of melodic things, like people remember the theme song to the show. This is the Tom Green Show. Yeah,
It's
people.
not the
my favorite
Tom
Yeah,
Show.
yeah. So as people remember some of those earworms, and there's a new one that's wasn't from the show, but it was on the show LOL Canada, where I sang this song, which is sort of what led to my Prime show, where they have a bunch of Canadian comedians in a room, and I sang this song, Delicious Cheese Sandwiches. So that's, people sing Delicious Cheese Sandwiches to me. Stuff from Road Trip, like Unleash the Fury. Lines from movies, I think, are pretty common too.
Speaking of Road Trip, I didn't realize that you worked with Todd Phillips on a Pepsi commercial, and he went on, direct Road Trip, directed Hangover, Joker. When you guys did Road Trip, did he kind of just let you do you in those scenes, or what direction did he give you?
Yeah, well, I wasn't, the mouse, when I put the mouse in my mouth, that wasn't in the script. So, and also the song, the Tiny Salmon song, that was pretty interesting because there was a guitar on the set, and I at the time could play 3 chords, and now I can play 4, so it's pretty good. But but he said, you want to write a song, so I wrote that Tiny Salmon song on my lunch break, and then came back and they filmed it, and then they've ended up putting that in the soundtrack. So he did let me have some free reign for sure. And the late great Canadian director producer Ivan Reitman produced the movie, so he actually directed a couple of the tour scenes that I was doing I was the tour guide. Ivan Reitman was out sort of with me doing that. So yeah, he kind of let me kind of go a little bit for sure. But I mean, for the most part, I stuck to the script other than, those 2 things. Yeah.
It looks like you're rock star touring on your comedy. I mean, it's all the way until June. And the difference would be if I'm on the road at all, I do Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday and come back.
Yeah.
It looks like you're out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, all the way, and you guys will put it up in the notes as well, but all the way until June.
Yeah.
So you guys are just here.
Yeah, well, no, I have a couple breaks in there. There's a few breaks in there where we're gonna, but yeah, for the most part, it's pretty intense tour. But it's good, it's fun. Like I said, we're traveling in the on the road, not getting on the airplanes. It's just nice. The shows are close together. We were in Chattanooga last night, Nashville tonight, on to Dallas, Tulsa, Oklahoma City. Then we'll be at Joe Rogan's Comedy Club, the Comedy Mothership, and then Houston. Then we get a little break, and then we pick it up again in Colorado. But yeah, it's fun because I'm playing a lot of music venues this time as well. So I have my guitar with me. So I'm start out the show with stand up and do a full stand up set, and then I pull out the guitar. I'll play the Tiny Salmon song and do some fun songs, and then kind of end it off with a few of my more songs from the record. Yeah.
So everybody check out This Is the Tom Green documentary. Loved it. The Amazon Prime specials. Those are it's a at your house. I mean, it's like Life Now. It's a 4-part, 3-part, 4-part.
Yeah, Tom Green Country, and then
But that's not out yet because I haven't seen that.
No, that comes out on the 31st.
Got it.
Yeah,
So it'll be out when this. Yes.
Yeah, and there's a stand-up special too that comes out in a couple of days. So it's the documentary, then there's the stand-up special, which is called "I Got a Mule," and then the show Tom Green Country comes out on the 31st. They'll all be out by the end of next week. Yeah.
And tickets to the tour, you get them at tomgreen.com. And wrapping this up here, there's the legend of the Bum Bum song having to be retired from TRL.
It's true.
Is it okay? I was going to ask, is it true? And if so, would you please tell the story?
Yeah, it's. I think it's the statute of limitations has passed on me not being supposed to tell this story, because I was not really. It was supposed to be kind of a secret back in the time because it was kind of a little bit. A weird thing happened. So, TRL. Everybody from our generation remembers TRL.
We watched Carson Daly, Jesse, everybody.
Total Request Live, right? People call in and they request their favorite song, and then it goes on the countdown every day. So that's all. That is how it works, right? It was everyone would call in, and that was really how it worked. They really did do that. But we went and shot this Bum Bum song and put it on the Tom Green Show, and I went and said, call TRL and vote for it. And we didn't really inform the producers of TRL that we were doing that. And, MTV knew about it because they knew what was happening, but it sort of fell through the cracks, or maybe they weren't expecting it would go to number one. I'm sure that was it. It didn't go to number. It did go to number one, like the next day. So like the show aired, and then it was I forget what day it aired, but it was the beginning of the week. The show was number one on the Monday of that week, and got a call from MTV. Howard, my manager at the time, got a call from MTV. He said, we need Tom to go on TRL on Friday and retire the Bum Bum song. And what do you mean? Why? That was number one again on Wednesday. And the call comes again, more frantic. No, he has to go retire. No, Tom doesn't want to retire it. He's got the number one song on Total Request Live in America. Why would he want to retire it? He has to retire it. And they weren't telling us why. And then they call again Thursday. He has to retire it. Here's why. And so the following week, this is the part I probably wasn't supposed to say, but it's been 25 years. I'm sure everyone can get over it. Carson Daly's done fine. He's on the Today Show now. But, they had pre-taped the next week because, scheduling of whatever it was. So they just basically sort of replicated the countdown from the week before. They had just replicated it. I don't know how often they pre-taped the TRL, but it was obviously real normally because the Bum Bum song went to number one just by accident, But because it was pre-taped the next week and they really couldn't just throw that out, they weren't able to tape that week for some reason, I had to retire the Bum Bum song on Friday because it was not going to be on the countdown the following Monday. It would have made no sense. So I played ball. I went on. I retired the song. I was on the countdown for 1 week. And they gave me a retirement home plaque, which I have hanging in my recording studio at home. But yeah, I'm still kind of a little annoyed at that, though, because I think it would have had a good run. Sometimes things would stay number one for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and then you could really, it would have been a really cool thing. But they took this song and turned it into, it's just a joke. It's not a real song. It's not with a real record company. So, let's just retire it. But there was that reason for it, and they were, of course, my boss, and I was happy to be there. So I did that. But the song, because the song was never officially released, it wasn't on a record or anything. It was also the number one most downloaded song on Napster that year in 1999, partially probably because you couldn't get it anywhere else. So in some ways that kind of was where people maybe started using Napster for the first time. It was really kind of it was an interesting moment in music history, the Bum Bum song.
They were obviously speculating what they thought would be the number one song when they were taping those episodes ahead of time. Mm-hmm. What took over as number one that they thought would have been number one? It was like an NSYNC or a Limp Bizkit or...
I can't remember exactly what it was. I know, I think Britney Spears was on the countdown. I think it was 98 Degrees was on there. I really don't I don't remember the exact countdown, but it was for sure some of those. I think Limp Bizkit was on the countdown then. Deservedly. Shout out Fred Durst, he's a friend of mine. I love Fred, love Limp Bizkit. But no, they, you know, I've got to become friends with Fred when I lived in LA, and he's those guys are still killing it. And that's from my my year on MTV, the Limp Bizkit. That was their big hits that year, and they're still killing it out there around the world. So,
well, Tom, thanks. And I'm sure I've stolen hundreds of things from you without even realizing it over the years, like no doubt. So thank you for all that.
Thank you, Bobby. I mean, this is so cool. I mean, I sort of rolled the dice and hit you up on Instagram and said, I'm going to be in Nashville and I'd love to come on your show. And it was so cool that you got right back to me, man. It was that's awesome, man. It's just an honor to be here in your amazing place. And thank you. Thanks.
I'm just glad you're real and not a scam. I fell for those Nigerian prince things way too many times. So that's what I thought you might have been.
Yeah,
it's real. He's really here.
Yeah. Next time I'll send a Nigerian prince just for...
Thank you. I'm more comfortable with that.
Yeah.
You know, give him my account number and we're just good after that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go to tomgreen.com, get tickets to the tour, and go to Amazon. The documentary is great, and there's just a lot of Tom Green content. Love to see it. Tom, thank you for coming by.
Thanks, Bobby. Thank you.